Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this year's 2020 version of the annual Holocaust Educators Workshop, which is normally held at the University of Hartford, sponsored by the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies on the last Monday of every October. And this year it became very clear that it was going to have to be a virtual workshop due to the pandemic and the extraordinary circumstances that so many of our teachers are finding themselves teaching under. So we are incredibly grateful to you for joining us here today for the workshop, and we're very excited for the launch of the new Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust website, which our wonderful presenters will be sharing with us, as well as the curricula that have been developed to support the website. My name is Avinoam Pat. I'm the director of the Center for Judaic Studies and Contemporary Jewish Life at the University of Connecticut. Until 2019, I was at the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford, where I have annually helped organize the Holocaust Educators Workshop. So it's a real delight for me to be able to continue to be here with all of you today. I'm going to review sort of the format for our workshop today, and I'm going to introduce our presenters now so we can get right into the meat of the workshop. After I speak, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly Bellaro, who is the director of the HERO Center, the Holocaust Education Resource and Outreach Center, which is a partnership between the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies and Voices of Hope. And the HERO Center really does extraordinary work in connecting the Hartford Remembers the Holocaust exhibit at the Museum of Jewish Civilization at the University of Hartford with educators around the state and organizing workshops and field trips for students around the state. And so Kim's going to tell you a little bit about the work that continues to go on around this. And then I'll turn it over to Elizabeth Devine and Tracy Wilson, who have designed this curriculum that goes together with the Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust website. Denise DeMello is also on the meeting today, and Denise has helped really design this incredible website. I'll do brief intros for our educators now. Tracy Wilson, you can see at least she's at the top of my screen. Tracy earned her intercultural studies degree at Trinity and her teaching certificate in 1977. She taught history in the West Hartford Public Schools for 38 years, focusing on United States history, African American history, and human rights. She has 25 years of experience providing professional development for high school history teachers through the College Board, the Connecticut Humanities Council, the Connecticut State Department of Education, and West Hartford Public Schools. And her interest in teaching and learning focuses on equity in the classroom, equity in education, relevant curriculum, thinking like a historian, and the student-centered classroom. She's now working on the Witness Stones Project, a public history project in West Hartford to restore the names of those who were enslaved in the town. She was the New England History Teacher of the Year by the New England Regional Office of the College Board in 2000, and was named the Connecticut State History Teacher of the Year by the Gilder Lehrman Institute in 2008, and was awarded an Olmsted Fellow Outstanding High School Teacher at Williams College in 2009. So that is Tracy Wilson, who will be speaking soon. Elizabeth Devine, who is co-collaborator on the designing of this curriculum, has a Master of Arts in Teaching from Colgate University and a distinguished 37 years experience of dynamic education experience teaching in the West Hartford Public Schools. She's the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the National Council of the Social Studies Secondary Teacher of the Year, New England History Teacher Association Kidger Award for Excellence in Social Studies, West Hartford Teacher of the Year. I could go on, but many honors that Liz has received. And Liz and Tracy usually go together, but this way we can see who is who. So we're very excited to have Liz and Tracy join us for the workshop. And after Liz and Tracy present on the Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust website and the curriculum that goes with it. Stu Abrams will be speaking on a curriculum that he has designed on teaching with memorials, and some of it which has been incorporated directly into the website that we're going to be learning about. Stu Abrams teaches genocide studies, psychology, history, and human rights education at Avon High School. He's the recipient of numerous awards, the Joseph Korzanik Fellowship for Excellence in Holocaust Education from the Greenberg Center at the University of Hartford, a Museum Teacher Fellowship from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Avon School District's Teacher of the Year in 2009-10, the Prudence Crandall Memorial Human and Civil Rights Award from the Connecticut Education Association, and he was the recipient of the inaugural Simon Conover Award in recognition for excellence in Holocaust teaching in 2016 from Voices of Hope. He serves as an organizer and presenter at the annual Holocaust Educators Workshop that the University of Hartford Greenberg Center organizes. And under the USHMM sponsorship, he served as an organizer and presenter at the Belfer Next Step Conference for the Northeast region, held at Skidmore College in Saratoga, New York in 2007. And I might add, he is the author of an excellent chapter in this recently published book called Understanding and Teaching the Holocaust, of which I am one of the co-editors. And Stu wrote the chapter, which he's basically going to be talking to us today about using memorials and monuments to teach the history of the Holocaust. So those are all of my introductions. And I'll just say before I turn it over to Kim that I'm so excited for this new website that has been developed. Many of you have probably seen the Hartford Remembers the Holocaust exhibition, which is at the University of Hartford in the Museum of Jewish Civilization. This exhibition, which tells the life story of 6 incredible Holocaust survivors who came and rebuilt their lives here in the greater Hartford community, teaches students about the history of the Holocaust through the experiences of these survivors. The exhibit itself, which was sponsored through grants from the Connecticut Humanities Council and the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Hartford, and with support of the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford and the Mandel Jewish Community Center and the Jewish Federation of Greater Hartford, really has been an outstanding resource that the Hero Center has helped to bring thousands of students through this exhibition. This year, as we've grappled with the pandemic and the challenges of organizing field trips and bringing students onto campuses or even bringing speakers to schools, the website that has been developed and the curricula that you're going to learn about today will just be an incredible new resource which will enable us to continue to reach schools even if we can't do it in person. So with that introduction, I'm very happy to turn it over to the wonderful Kimberly Bellaro, Director of the Hero Center. Kim.
Thank you so much, Avi, and good afternoon, everyone. Wow, I really thought I knew Tracy, Stu, and Liz, but that list of awards and recognitions was much longer than even I thought. So I'm very happy to be working with everyone on this project. As Avi mentioned, I'm the director of the Hero Center, which is a joint initiative between Voices of Hope and the Greenberg Center. And it's an initiative that really does allow us to work more directly with educators and students across Connecticut and now beyond. It's been my pleasure and my honor to coordinate tours of the Hartford Remembers the Holocaust exhibit since 2018. And really the physical exhibit is truly a gem in the state. And so I have to thank Avi and everyone involved in creating it, as well as everyone at the Greenberg Center for allowing Voices of Hope to coordinate this virtual version of it. When we were doing physical tours, groups were getting bigger. We were reaching more students than ever. Schools were booking multiple days to make sure their students were getting a chance to visit the exhibition. We were running out of space, and we started planning for a traveling version that would go on the road and travel the state and visit all of the schools that couldn't make it to us. And really, I would say 5 days before Connecticut began its initial lockdown, my colleagues and I were at a design business looking at panels and fold up stands for this physical traveling exhibit. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to fit this in my car? And the running joke was that I was going to have to get I would have to go get my trucker's license in order to move this new physical traveling exhibit. So after the lockdown started, it was very clear we needed another strategy, and this is how the virtual exhibit was born. I cannot thank Liz, Tracy, and Denise enough for building this site to reflect the stories of survival featured in the physical exhibit, and for creating curriculum around these personal stories that we've all come to know so well, and the greater themes found within these stories. There have been a lot of individuals who have combed through every piece of the website to give feedback, and so thank you to everyone who has done that. Finally, this will remain a growing and evolving virtual space for educators and students to learn and to discuss. It has wonderful opportunities for expansion, and we encourage educators to leave us feedback about it. Let us know how you used all or parts of the curriculum, what worked for your students and what didn't. We truly want this space to be to make an impact in your classroom. And so thank you to everyone who is joining us today to learn about it and how it can help you going forward. So right now, even though we cannot meet with you all in person, the Hero Center still offers survivor talks for student groups, as well as talks with the descendants of survivors. We are also here to help you with anything you might need for your Holocaust and Genocide unit. So please feel free to get in touch to learn more about what we can offer your virtual classroom. I will put my email address in the chat, so please get in touch at any time. And with that, I will turn it over to Liz. Thank you.
Thanks. One of the things I just want to say while I'm sharing my screen is in the chat, if perhaps people who have joined us could just tell us who you are, give us your names, what school you teach at, what grade level you teach. That will just help us, just introduce yourself as we're working. I'll be talking first, and Tracy will monitor the chat, and then when she's talking, I'll monitor the chat so that we might be able to answer questions if there are. And then and place any questions that you have as we're speaking. And then at the end, we'll try to address any questions, right? Is that good? Yeah, everybody good?
Yeah, and add the grade level and your subject matter. I feel like social studies and history, or whether in language arts or English.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, perfect. Good idea. I forgot about that. Yeah, thank you, Trace. Okay. Let me share my screen here. I'm hoping this is working, I think. You have to, somehow I can't tell, but tell me, is it shared?
It's shared.
Yes.
But
now, is there,
stretch it out.
Now how, okay, forgive me, but it's shared, but I have to stretch it out.
Maybe I need to stretch out.
I don't know. What's the, tell me, this is what I always have forgotten. So how do I stretch it out? Or
I think it looks good, Liz.
Is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
I have 6 major points that I'll make, and I first want to, stop and just say thanks to Avi and to Kim. It's been really a pleasure to work with you, and of course, it's always an honor to work with Stu. Tracy, Stu, and I have done some workshops for the state together. We've had a lot of fun doing that. And I actually was a teacher in West Hartford Public Schools for a long time, and I had Stu's son actually in class. So it's all sort of all comes together. This, when the Avi, well, Tracy, I should step back and say, Tracy and I helped design the visit to the, to the workshop, or to the, I should say, to the exhibit in the University of Hartford. And that was really fun to do. And it was important. And we knew it was important for our students, for all the students, and it was important for the adults who were there as well. Both Tracy and I do realize one thing about teaching the Holocaust is that it can be overwhelming. And I'm sure a lot of you have felt this in your classroom as well. And so one of our goals is to organize our workshops and then also our lessons for that exhibit, but also for the virtual exhibit in a way that it's manageable in the classroom, because we do understand that even if you're teaching human rights, you can't spend 6 weeks on one topic, that you sort of have to fit things in. So that's one of our philosophies in putting this together. And Denise, who we work with, Tracy, Denise, and I work on the witness stones, and she's been unbelievably helpful in terms of thinking out a plan for how we would do this virtually, so that we can bring this to every classroom in the state. So one of the things is that there's just a lot out there. So you'll see, and you'll see that one of the things that we've done, if you look at the sidebar here, is that we've organized it in a way that is manageable. So if you're a middle school world regional studies teacher, and we do know the curriculum, Tracy and I know the curriculum for each of the levels because we worked for the state for a long time working on the state standards. So we thought, how are we going to put this together? And we thought, well, one thing we should do is make sure we gear it towards certain levels, because that might help teachers decide what they want to use. So you'll see that we did this here. Middle school has a different topic. Then you have the grade 9 world history, and grade 11 to 12 is government and human rights. So that's one thing that we did. I mean, we thought we'd focus at least the teachers in that way. The other thing that we've done is that we've used inquiry for each of the levels. So for instance, if we go to the middle school, on the front page, for instance, there are questions. And what we've done is used the big questions, and questions that are compelling enough that they can actually apply to what's happening today. And that's really important, because that's the second goal that we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that these lessons that we would use for each of the levels applied to today, because we all know that you can't just study the Holocaust separately. You have to be able to look at it and then understand why it's important today. And so that's what we've done for each of these. So for our middle school students, you'll see that, for instance, we have a lesson on identity and empathy, and we actually designed this for the exhibit at the University of Hartford. And this is very successful. And Tracy's actually going to walk you through this. But this idea is that, basically all kids understand, all people understand what identity is and what about their identity is important. So we figured we sort of pull this thread all the way through this unit to look at the idea of identity for the survivors. And so for this unit, we focused on refugees. And then what we did with this unit was look at refugees today. So the lessons on refugees today are updated, very vibrant, dynamic lessons about what to do with your students in the classroom about the refugee situation. And of course, it's pretty timely given what's going on in the world. You'll see that, and so I'll just go down here. For the 9th grade world history, we decided to do look at the issue of perpetrators, bystanders, upstairs, and I guess I would use the word rescuers. I know that Stu likes that term, rescuers. And so in this case, we are particularly, and so we're asking different questions. So the questions here, the big question is, what roles can people play in perpetuating and preventing injustice? Again, a compelling question. It's something that can be answered during the Holocaust, but it can be answered today as well. And we think that's important. Because obviously we can learn about being a perpetrator, bystander, upstairs, or a rescuer from the survivors, but we can also today look at what it means to be a rescuer, resistor in the world today that we live in. And so we've designed some lessons, and all the updated lessons for today have a civic engagement piece, because as you know, the state standards talk about civic engagement. But after all, it's important to take that material and apply it. So that's why we've done that for each of the units. And for the unit on grades 10 to 12, this one was particularly designed with government in mind and human rights. And Stu has been a tremendous help on this. We've done a lot of work. We've picked his brain. We talked with him a lot about it. We've seen him teach some units on memorials, and so we got a lot of our inspiration for this unit on memorials. So the other thing I want to point out is not only do we have these different ideas, focused, but for each level, we also have, which we really think is important, are supplemental lessons. And we did this because a while ago, we actually drew up lots of lessons, and we thought, okay, how can teachers use this? And if we populated this site with all these different lessons, it would just be so overwhelming. But for teachers who are interested, again, the focus, if they want to look at this idea of identity and empathy and refugees, we thought, what better lessons to work on when you're in middle school, but the idea of Kindertransport. There's a lot, of course, as you know, a lot of our, all of our survivors were children. And so that was really compelling. And so we have units, and what I've done for each of these, and Tracy and I both did this. I did a few of these actually for the first time when we did this, I don't know, 4 years ago. And so we've given you the sort of the time it might take to do these units. I'll give you an example under the Kindertransport. As an example, they are, not only do they have a purpose, they have resources with live links, in addition to the kind of, lessons about how to I see a mistake. I have to spell that word correctly. That would help. Lessons on how to implement, how to use the material, and then activities at the end. So we think that this is something that you could do in your classroom. And again, it's something that maybe you just want to do something on the Kindertransport. Maybe you want to do something just on refugees of war, but you can sort of pop these out, work on them, and use them in your classroom. And I will say that we were talking this morning, Tracy and I, that there's and Avi as well. There's no reason why, if you're teaching a 10th grader or an 11th grader, if you decide you want to do something on refugees, that you can't use migration and refugees for upper level kids. So we think that's important. So the supplemental lessons for each level, there are supplemental lessons. So the one for 9th grade has to do with Kristallnacht, Warsaw, Ghetto, and rescuers. And again, the same thing. For every single one, there are live links. There are details for how long it might take. There's vocabulary in there. There are lessons, and they're all updated in terms of how you might use them in terms of an updated activity in the classroom. And the same thing. And for grade 10 to 12, of course, that has more to do with the remembering. How do we remember? And that's analyzing memorials today. And so what I did for this one, for supplemental lessons, is we looked at remembering rescuers, looking at propaganda and justice and accountability, and those two last themes fit in with people who are teaching human rights. There are some slideshows that go together with these lessons, and those are all open, and you can also use those in your classroom, easily enough.
Liz, you got about 1 more minute.
Well, I'm just about done.
All right,
one final thing, I'm very good here. The one final thing I wanted to say to you is that Tracy's going to talk about the survivors. They are the most important part of this, as you know. And so she's going to talk a little bit about using the survivors in your classroom. They're just so amazing, these people, and we want to make sure that teachers can use the material in the classroom in a way that is efficient, effective. And it's obviously very important. It's provocative for the students. These are our local references. And the other final thing I just want to say is, if you look at, you see that we have resources here, and we have vetted and curated resources for teachers because there is so much. So the collections that I list here from Yad Vashem, the collections from Echo and Reflections, from Facing History, and obviously from the Holocaust Museum. The ones these are all listed throughout the lessons on the site are very focused. They work really well. They're good for students because it's short. The films are short. They're very easy to introduce and integrate into lessons. There we go. How's that? All right. I'm going to have Tracy, I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to have Tracy talk about more specifically how you might use the lessons of the Holocaust survivors in your classroom.
All right, Liz, nice setup.
There we go.
So I am going to now share my screen, and I just want to sort of take you through how you might use this, focusing on one of these child survivors, and that is Ruth Tootie Fishman. And so, you know, if I first came on this site, what I might do is I might just click on this Holocaust survivors. And here you're going to see the 6 people who, if you've been to the museum, you've seen the panels on these 6 people. And if you click on Tootie, you're going to see what is in this, what was in the museum, or what is in the museum. And so one way to access is to just look at, is just to go into the Holocaust survivors piece. And one of the things that we came up with, because I think some people, Tootie's happens to be a little bit shorter than some of the others, but sometimes it's hard for kids in middle school to work their way through this text. And so we have 2 things to help them to do that. And it's a map and a timeline. So there's a worksheet that goes with it. And then there is this, as they read, we've got a map of Europe here that you can see. They look for number 1. And this is the first place she lives that she mentions. And they can write in as they read where it is. And then they can look at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so they're going to find out her life as a refugee. And there's also a worksheet here for them to record where she was and what she was doing and how old she was. Because again, one of the neat things about this exhibit is that these survivors were the ages of the students that were teaching. And so we think that helps with their interest as well. And when Stu talks, he's going to talk about monuments. And in some ways, we see these interviews as monuments. They're something that they're leaving for us, and they're expressing ideas and values as they tell their stories. And so this is a hard question to think about, but I think something that that students can think about is, what are the ideas and values that Tootie's story represents? So let me just get back. Okay. And so at every level, at the 6th grade level, at the 9th grade level, at the 10th grade level, we're asking for students to just start with this. You get the map, you read, and so you can find out their story and then have some documentation of that. And, you know, we're suggesting that you assign one of 6 people, or students get to choose one of these people, but not that they read all the stories necessarily, but that they sort of focus in on one person. So I'm just going to take you to the middle school section where we're talking about refugees. And here we're really interested in this idea of identity and empathy. And so if you click on that, you're going to see this identity and empathy worksheet. And this is something that we have found to be really effective with students. And so they get this chart, and they're asked a series of questions. And we know that everybody has a number of identities, but what happens in the Holocaust is that people had one identity, and that identity was being Jewish. And so everything that happened to them was with focused on that identity. But we're asking the students to think about their identities and which identities are important to them, what makes them feel safe, what makes them feel the least safe, and what gives them power and privilege. And then there's a section at the end which asks them to reflect on their identity and this idea of humanizing and dehumanizing depending on different parts of their humanity. And I happen to think that we have this in the middle school piece, that that's something that would be valuable to do at all levels. So let's see, I got off my, so the second part, so that's sort of the introduction. The second part is to learn from the survivors. And so here you can see the 6 people listed again. You click on it and it will take you to where we were originally. And so we really, with Tootie, you'll see below her that there are a series of 6 videos. So they did a long interview with her, and each of these videos are somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes long, I would say. And for this particular lesson, This Is Your Doll is just this incredible story of this doll that her parents or father gave her, and that she was responsible for, and that she still had finally donated to the museum. But it gave her something that I guess that helped have more of an identity for her, because she had something she was responsible for. And then this 4th video in the cattle cars really gives you a sense of what it's like to be a refugee, of not knowing where you're going, of not knowing what the future was going to bring, of just this incredible uncertainty, and just a great description there. But you can fairly quickly go through these 8 short videos, and really, really accessible for students. In her last video, she just has this great message for students that you would want them to hear. You can survive. Don't bully people. Be accepting, and talk up when you see something that's wrong. And so when Liz said, you know, we really need to listen to their stories. This is sort of the core of the lesson here. And then there is another Google Slides section, and this hasn't really been fully developed yet, but you'll find a whole series of primary sources that and some maps that will help you tell a little more specifically where she was, that you may be able to find use for as well. And then the final piece of the lesson is to make your way to refugees today. And there's a series of child refugees that we hook you into. This first one, Leo Malamed, this is just a 1-minute video where he talks about the uncertainty of being a refugee. And I think part of our message, I'm going to just see, I'm pretty sure that I can show this. This is another 1-minute video, which I'm sure as teachers you're involved in your virtual teaching now. But I just want to show this now, and I'm pretty sure that it will work. This is Samantha Power, who served as the UN ambassador. And this is from the Facing History website. And she is talking to a group of high school students in New York City.
It's always really important to, when you talk about refugees or any population that is vulnerable or that is struggling, to put a human face on the population. You know, when you hear refugees, sometimes you guys are very, very nuanced, and you've been exposed to it in your class, and clearly you've talked about it amongst yourselves. But some people just hear refugees and it just feels like a big problem. It's just too scary. It's too big. There are too many. And trying to convince people that there are small things you can do even if you can't solve the whole problem tomorrow, that there's still a way, to help a new refugee out who's just come to New York City. And so figuring out how you can partner with people who've just arrived and lend them a helping hand, even if it's just to help them with their English or their math, or, I think they're really small things one can do. But part of what my job is to make a huge problem seem a little more manageable, that there are small steps you can take. And if everybody was taking more small steps, we'd make a greater dent in the big problem.
So I just want to end by saying, I think that's what this this exhibit does so well, is that it does humanize, and it does allow kids to learn these stories and be able to tell these stories. And knowing, you really get to know these individuals if you follow through the materials and see where they moved and see what their life was like and listen to them on these videos. And it's, I think it does what Samantha Power asks us to do, which is, what's the one next good thing that you can do. So with that, on to Mr. Abrams.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I've gotten off to a good start. I unmuted myself, which is something I generally forget to do. But I wanted to thank Liz and Tracy for working with both of them on this. Liz, especially, having had my son, I don't know what to tell you, but you were the only high school teacher that ever got him motivated. He didn't hit his stride till a few years after high school, but so thank you for that. Avi, thank you for dragging me along with the textbook and writing that chapter, and also want to thank, I saw Kathy on the screen. Thank you to Voices of Hope for helping support these kinds of academic and scholastic events. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to talk real quickly because I was told I didn't have 2 hours when I first started, just about 15 minutes. And but I wanted to demonstrate how you can take this extraordinary website that Tracy and Liz put together and sort of adapt it to something that you may have particular interest in. And I'm going to use the story of Jan Korjac as the method by which to do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each slide. You have the recording, so if you wanted to go back and look at it, please do. But so anyway, one of the things that the website talks about is what is the value of memorials and monuments. When I first started doing this and writing this chapter, I never in my wildest dreams could have imagined that monuments would have become so controversial as they have become. So yeah, it was the timing was actually very serendipitous. And but the question of if we want, who do we want to put on a pedestal? Do we want to put people who we want to emulate their virtues, people whose values we want to aspire to? I think often that is the case. But there are some other questions that the website raises that you can see here. Can the monument tell the complete story? Is it impervious and shielded from the memories that they're trying to sustain? And I think the most important one is the last one there, is whether or not people can become passive about remembering. I think the goal of any memorial or monument is so that you become an active rememberer, that you don't leave the responsibility of remembering up to the memorial, but rather you take the responsibility on yourself. The idea that we have certain obligations here. These are some additional questions that you might consider, and these are the questions that memorial artists have to consider when they create one. I know that James Young, I think he may be on my next slide, talks about, he was on the board for the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, and he has said something to the effect that, maybe we shouldn't really ever build any memorial to the Holocaust in Berlin, but rather just come back every 5 years and talk about what we think it should look like, because over time, these things can change. Here is the thesis by which I would start any lesson on memorials and monuments. And that is, once we assign monumental form to memory, we have to some degree divested ourselves of the obligation to remember. The idea again here is similar in that we don't want to leave the responsibility or the obligation of remembering an event or a person up to a piece of stone. We want to have people who see these memorials remember the event or the person themselves. So we're going to talk just briefly here about Korjac. He's the founder of 2 orphanages in Warsaw. He was a medical doctor. He was an educator. He devoted his life to children. He was a tremendous writer in both quantity and quality. And so he was a great writer, not only for children, but especially for teachers. You know, it's interesting. Every once in a while, you see somebody who makes you feel good that you're in education. And when you read about somebody like Korjac, you go, you know what? I'm kind of happy I'm doing what I'm doing. He's an inspirational figure. Here's what the orphanages or the orphanage in the Warsaw Ghetto looks like now, with the this here with the bust in the front. This is another Korjac memorial in Warsaw, and we were there. I have taken students to Europe a number of times, and when we go to Warsaw, that certainly is one of the stops. One of the quotes from Korjac: "I'm not here to be loved and admired, but to act and love. It is not the duty of people to help me, but it is my duty to look after the world and the people in it." He's better known, obviously, for this noble, courageous act that he performs, which I'll mention in a minute. But you can also see all of these illustrations on these drawings, on these slides as well. And we'll talk about those at the end. Korjac was a pseudonym. You can see the name he was born with. It was an assimilated Jewish family that he was born to. He becomes a pediatrician, no question. What else would he become? And he's going to serve in the military. And one of the great things, he decides after working during the Russo-Japanese War that he thinks he could make a more lasting impression and contribution to the world as an educator rather than a medical doctor. Another reason you can't help but be moved by Korjac. You can see here, 1908, he joins the Orphan Society. In 1910, he meets Stefa Wilczynska, who will be his right-hand person for the duration of his life with orphanages and children. She's with him the entire way. The Damsarat orphanage is the one that will ultimately be moved into the Warsaw Ghetto. His nickname was the Old Doctor, and the thing that you really need to keep in mind when you talk about Korjac is his progressive ideas when it came to education. He was far and away light years ahead of anyone else then, and perhaps even now, in terms of how schools should be organized, how punishment should be administered, and that there were courts and there were juries made up of the kids. And it wasn't impossible for an administrator or a teacher to be brought up in front of the court. He was endowed with an uncanny empathy for children and obviously a deep concern for children's rights. He was very influential in the Rights of the Child written by his ideas for the UN. The war breaks out, and he is forced to move the Jewish orphanage inside the walls of the ghetto. And he was very well known throughout Poland, and he had many chances to get out of the ghetto, and he was offered shelter on the Aryan side, but he refuses to leave his children. And throughout his stay in the ghetto, he continues to work tirelessly, even though he was in ill health, to do whatever he could for the children. And I think the quote at the bottom there is the one that's most important to me, that in view of the harsh reality and sometimes the loss of values outside the ghetto, he tried his best to educate the children to honesty and truth. He will write a diary during his time in the ghetto that will be published posthumously, and is, I don't know exactly how many languages it's now published in, but quite a lot. The event that he's most known for is this March of Devotion. When the ghetto is being liquidated, the children and the teachers and the administrators are walking from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Umschlagplatz, which was the transit point in which they would get on the trains and go to Treblinka. And all the children were dressed in their best clothes. They all had a toy or a book and a knapsack. They would all get on these trains, and about an hour later wind up in the slaughterhouse Treblinka, and in short order would be murdered. These on the left is another memorial in Warsaw to Korjac, and there's a quote by somebody who was there. An interesting story. Apparently, there was an SS officer at the train station at the Umschlagplatz who recognized Korjac and said, "Old doctor, I remember reading your books when I was a young person, and I know what's going to happen, and I want to help you, and I want to save you. And I can, even at that late date, he could have been rescued and gone to the Aryan side." And of course, his answer is, "No, I'm not leaving my children." And yeah, there are some survivors, and they're now my age and older, and he was clearly loved by them all. Here are some quotes from some of the survivors of children that were in Korjac's orphanage. He writes, and I thought this was an interesting way to end this quick section. My life has been difficult but interesting, and in my younger days, I asked God for precisely that. So he is one of those not often well-known figures, but an extraordinary, extraordinary character. You know, I always tell my students that they are messengers to a time that I shall not see, and I'm unabashedly hopeful for the future because of them. And I tell them that they are heroes in waiting, just waiting for that opportunity to demonstrate their courage. And I believe it is learning about people like Korjac that makes young and old more likely when that moment arrives, when the moral choice has to be made, that it is the courageous choice that will be made. Reimagining Korjac for the classroom. So here's an artist by the name of Itzhak Belfer, and he says, and this is kind of related to those questions that I started with. Whenever I try to put down on the canvas or paper the horrors of the Holocaust, or to find an expression for them, I was gnawed by doubt. Is this possible? Can anybody do this? Can an artist do this? And you can see another one of his examples there. What's interesting about this, all of the illustrations you saw in the beginning and all of the illustrations we see now were all done by Itzhak Belfer, who was indeed a pupil of Janos Korjac in the Warsaw Ghetto. He leaves the ghetto before the war starts, so he is able to survive. This is, as a teacher, this is one of the interesting ways in which you could use a person like Belfer to connect to all sorts of historical events. Here's a survivor. Look at what his, similar to the survivors that we have in the exhibit. Here's was his path. Here's how he wound up in Israel. And then you can, through Belfer, you can talk about life in the Warsaw Ghetto. You can talk about life in the Red Army. You can talk about his relationship with Korjac. I mean, there are all sorts of ways you can go with this. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but the rights of the child, I just highlighted a couple here. The child has the right to fail. I think we all should remember that as educators. The child has the right to respect for his secrets. The child has the right to a lie, a deception, a theft. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so to move quickly here, Wiesel says, without memory, there is no culture. Without memory, there would be no civilization, no society, no future. I can't imagine anybody would disagree with that sentiment. Here are the symbolic, these aren't the actual tracks to Treblinka, but they are symbolic tracks. I've taken students here as well when we've traveled to Europe. The memorial at Treblinka is, for me, the most haunting and haunted place I've ever been. There are 17,000 of these shards of granite that make up the primary memorial there. You can see in the middle, there's a large obelisk that these things center around. What makes this chilling is the fact there are no names on any of these 17,000 stones. It looks like this some sort of Tim Burton-like cemetery. But there is only one name on these stones, and that name is, of course, Janusz Korjac. Having my hand on that stone was one of those moments that you will never forget, especially with the understanding of what he did and understanding why he did it. Not sure that I'm not sure I could have done it. That is certain. I wanted to end with this. So there were those 6 survivors that are at the beginning of the website. 5 of the 6 of them have had direct contact with students at Avon High School. And my sense is that 1 hour with any one of these survivors, I feel as if they've had more impact on my students in 1 hour than I've had in the 100 years I've been teaching. And the one in particular, Abby Weiner, Abby and I was the luckiest person around to have created this relationship with Abby when he moved up to West Hartford. Must have been about 9 years before he's passed away now. And this is a picture of Abby when he went back to visit Auschwitz. He was a boyhood friend of Elie Wiesel. They were in the same transport from Siget to Auschwitz, and they both are liberated from Buchenwald, as Abby would say. April 11th was his second birthday. April 11, 1945 was his second birthday. And there is an expression on his face that, it's hard to read into it, but he was an extraordinary human being. He was the embodiment of heroism, of personal healing, of resiliency, compassion, survival with dignity, mental toughness, and moral courage. He was the greatest teacher I have ever known. His stirring life experience and shocking personal stories, as well as his profound wisdom, was a beacon for anyone who crossed his path. He taught us limits of the human spirit that we just simply didn't think were possible. He taught us to live lives of unbending principle, to live lives of nobility and integrity, and he inspired us to live a life of courageous empathy. It was the greatest honor I've had, probably, in being a friend to Abby Weiner. The picture on my right, I'm not sure what side it's on, anybody who's looking at this, but is when I took students to Europe in 2016. By the way, when you talk about memorials and monuments, if you can take students to these places, stepping on these hallowed grounds, on these graveyards is an extraordinary, it is life altering. You cannot possibly be the same person after you stepped on these grounds. And the stone that you see in the front here, one of the students that was with me had worked on a project for the Yom HaShoah commemoration, and she got very close with a survivor that she was interviewing. And when they found out that Julia was going to Europe with me, they asked if she would leave a stone somewhere, anywhere, when we were visiting Auschwitz in remembrance of a family member. And you can see here, the stone with KI on it was the stone that we left and where Julia decided to leave it. These people that we still, thank goodness, have some able to still do this in person. This is an event you must not lose the opportunity to have. It is just awe-inspiring. And also, if you can ever travel, if any of us could ever travel again, taking students to places like this I can work and teach for a month in my classroom and not have the same kind of experience that students will have when they visit these places. So that's all I have. Thanks so much for listening. And now I'll turn it back over to Avi and Avi.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stu, for sharing your time and your expertise, and to Liz and Tracy for taking us on a guided tour through the website, this incredible resource with the curricula that's been developed, and Denise, who has helped design the website. We do have some time for questions. We've just shared a great deal of material with all of you who are here in attendance, both the resources that are on the website, the curricula that are on the website, the different sections that you see that are organized according to the 6 different survivors. And I would love to open it up to anyone who's here. If you do have a question, you can either type it in the chat, or we are a small group. Please feel free to unmute yourself and let us know if you have a question. I do see that there was one question from Joe, which I'm happy to address first off, and if anybody else wants to chime in. So Joe writes, I like the organization of the materials by grade and subject. Will there be a way to add local modules? There are many interesting stories associated with the Jewish community that established Temple Beth Israel in Killingly, with which Mr. Berman is associated, one of our other participants on this meeting, Norman Berman. There are many interesting stories that could benefit from having such a platform that could tell stories of survivors and second generation from Eastern Connecticut. Mr. Berman's presentations to students are well received every year. So first of all, thank you, Joe Lewerk, for being here and also representing Killingly. And I would just say that I think, and feel free to chime in, but I think the way that this website has been designed actually opens up the possibility for us to share many, many more local stories of survival. So while the 6 survivors who are the original sort of survivors featured in the Hartford Remembers the Holocaust exhibit are all folks who rebuilt their lives either in Hartford, Greater Hartford, West Hartford, the website itself is now renamed Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust. And one of our goals is to share additional stories, to basically have a template that we can use where we include some biographical material of survivors, some video material of survivors, some documentation that can be used in the classroom, all sorts of materials that would add to many of these incredible stories of survival that we have throughout the state of Connecticut, that we want to make this local history, materials that our students can connect to so that they can learn about people who moved to their towns and their communities and came here as refugees and became part of our state and our communities. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that.
I just real quickly, the beauty of this work that Liz and Tracy have done, the extraordinary work, is that it really is a living document. So to add things to it seems to me to be part of the rationale, part of the purpose for having the document created this way, so that those kinds of stories, which I'm sure are certainly worthwhile, could be incorporated into any way a teacher would want to use them. And you sort of have this framework. It's like a symphony, right? You have the format for a symphony, and then you can put your own notes in it and go from there.
I just also want to say that, so normally, Avi, you would also kind of do a call for teachers to submit ideas and plans for a curriculum. This is a site that lends itself to be a platform for teachers' voices and ideas. And I think in all of our planning for this workshop today, Liz and Tracy kept saying, the thing that teachers are missing with this being virtual is that they don't get to talk to each other and talk about the challenges and their ideas and their experience but maybe this is a, Joe, this is a great question that we can add something like this to the website where there would be a place for us to both collect and display what other schools are doing. So I think this is a great opportunity to do that.
The other thing I would just add is that, what's local is great for students, right? So where they live in their town, they see that this is just not this, one Holocaust survivor lives in West Hartford or 6 live in West Hartford. Does that mean they don't live anywhere else? And so I think that's what's really great about the website as well. You populate it with more people. So, and people that live in these student communities. So it broadens their understanding of those people who are survivors and are still, their stories are still important.
So I'll just add, as we are waiting for other questions that come in, that as has been mentioned in the chat, there is a survey that we've included on the website, and I'm just going to share my screen as well so that folks can see it. And we actually have incentivized participation in your giving feedback on the website. So we would love to get your feedback on today's workshop and this Holocaust Educators Workshop survey, which you'll see if you go to the Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust feedback page. And for that matter, there is a page on the website where we'd love to have your feedback on the website itself. And to incentivize participation both, and we're so happy that you're all here, that won't take you long to do the feedback on the survey. So I mentioned this newly published resource that's called Understanding and Teaching the Holocaust that Laura Hilton and I co-edited. And it has 20 chapters from historians and from educators around the country on how to teach about the Holocaust and cutting edge new research. So if you fill out your survey on the website and include your contact information, just we have your email address, so just give us your feedback on the website and then I'll get in touch with you. We'd be very happy to send you a free copy. Right? I feel like a one of these promoters out here, but we really would be happy to send you a free copy of the book, which has just come out, and it's part of the University of Wisconsin's Understanding and Teaching series. And Stu has his whole chapter on using memorials, and there's many other chapters that are on here. I think it's a really good resource. So please, go to the website, check it out, and fill out the survey, and we'd be very happy to send you a copy of this book.
To make a note that Deborah here, she mentioned in the chat that she's from the Vermont Holocaust Museum, and that she plans on sharing it with her colleagues. So first of all, thank you for that. And I think in this virtual world, there's been so many opportunities to work with educators and museums and education centers across the country, and everybody has so many wonderful things to offer. This is the perfect time to collaborate with, again, with other centers and states, and really whoever is working towards these same goals. It's been a wonderful experience to see that people from other states and really other countries are becoming more involved in our programming. And so if there is anything that we can also do to help in Vermont, we would be happy to talk to you about that. It really is a wonderful time to talk and I think to build things together, especially I think something we didn't even mention is that this mandate in Connecticut requires Holocaust and genocide education, and one of this I think was kind of an answer to that. We do want to be able to expand the site to include other genocides that would help teachers better address and meet both the letter and the spirit of the mandate as we've been expressing it. And so this is really a great opportunity to expand that. And with more and more states requiring Holocaust education, There's so much work that we all have to do to make sure that it's implemented correctly and appropriately. So yeah, again, this is a great opportunity for us to do that together. So thank you for joining us, Deborah.
Liz, Tracy, Stu, before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to offer any concluding remarks that you'd like to before we close today's virtual workshop. Go ahead,
Told you
Stu, why don't you start?
I'll follow you, Stu.
Okay, the only thing I'd like to say is the website is such an impressive resource for teachers at all levels. It's easy to use. The more you drill down into it, the more material becomes available. It's just, there's so much material out there. How do you begin to pick and choose what's going to work best for your class, your situation, your area? And hats off to Liz and Tracy. Just it's a humbling honor to have worked with you guys in professional development stuff, and also to have any contribution to the website. Is you guys did the heavy lifting, not me. That's for sure.
Well, I was just going to say that your presentation, what you just did right now, kind of made me a little tearful, and I'm going to look this guy up. I can't believe I don't know who this guy is. Janis Korjac. That's wonderful. That's terrific. So I always learn something from you, Stu. I know Tracy's would agree with that. The other thing I guess I would just say is it's so important now because of what's going on in the world that we just need so much more of this and more collaboration with teachers at all levels. And maybe with, there can be more work that can be done with people. What did you call them, Avi, the last time? The new teachers. I don't know. There's a word that you used for
the in-service and pre-service.
Yes, there you go, teachers. And I have to say, if I had to make a guess, a lot of the in-service and pre-service teachers don't really know how to do this. They don't really have a lot of. They have so much that they have to learn. And I don't know if they have a lot of this under their belt, before they come into the classroom. So that might be something else that we can think about for the future in terms of working more with them. But it's just so important. So it's been a privilege to work with all of you. And I just know I'm glad we're doing it. So.
All right, Tracy, you're good. Thumbs up. All right, so I really want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you again to Liz and Tracy, Tracy and Liz. I don't know why we always say Liz and Tracy, Tracy and Liz, but also to Denise DeMello for the wonderful work on designing the website, and of course to Stu Abrams for sharing his knowledge and expertise with us, to Kim and the Hero Center and Voices of Hope for the extraordinary support to create this project, and of course to the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. Susan Gottlieb is here on the call somewhere, at least she was a little bit earlier. Normally she would greet us on the morning of the workshop every year with bagels and coffee. And I sincerely hope that next year, the last Monday in October, we'll all be getting together in person at the University of Hartford. I will say, and of course this goes without saying, that we all agree how incredibly important this work is today, especially now. Many of you know that tomorrow will be marking the 2-year anniversary of the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, which took place on October 27th, 2018. Just 3 years ago, we had the march in Charlottesville in Virginia. And of course, we're seeing concerning upticks in anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, racism of all kinds. So I want to thank everybody who took the time to join us here today for your commitment and dedication to teaching this topic, for fulfilling both the spirit and the letter of the mandate to teach the Holocaust and genocide in the state of Connecticut. We are sincerely grateful to you for your dedication, for continuing to teach this critical topic in our schools. And once again, thank you to our extraordinary presenters. Everyone, be well, stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope to see you in person very, very soon.
Stay positive, test negative. That's the goal.
Very good, Mr. Abrams. All right. Be well, everyone.
Avi, what time?